Like, we want to be the Fitbit for your brain. Just like Fitbit enabled us to see how many steps we're getting per day. I want to show you what it means to change your diet and see what effect that has on your cognitive performance, and actually warn you when something's going wrong. So if you're approaching crisis point, we tell you when you can do something about it rather than when you're in it.
So it's so nice to see you again, Max, and welcome to CodeBase. Let's just get stuck in, I guess. Can you start by introducing yourself and your journey so far, from like when you started in games development to where you are with GLITCHE'R'S?
Hello, Ruth. Yeah, it's a big story. Yeah, so I'm Maxwell Scott-Slade. I'm the founder of GLITCHE'R'S. We build video games with scientists, and it wasn't always that way. You know, originally I had a company called Johnny Two Shoes with my brother Josh, and we just built games for a laugh. I never thought it was a job, you know. And then I guess like from that point, we really quickly had some online kind of success. So we sort of like chased that. And then before you know it, you're running a business. Before you know it, you've got staff. And before you know it, we were one of the few companies in the world doing sort of like brand collaborations, which sounds weird because that was like a long time ago. So GLITCHE'R'S is kind of quite a different beast. It's very much about how can we use games to engage people with really complex issues, like their own health or environmental issues and things like that. Yeah. And
how did you go from that sort of games for pure fun and engagement into where you are now with like this really health-focused work? We're all seeking meaning.
I think that's true. But also, yeah, it is a strange one. There aren't many games companies that do that leap. And I think for me, there were some really fascinating projects in the early days of Johnny Two Shoes. Like we worked with Channel 4 and we did a game called The Great Sperm Race where you play as a sperm.
Nice.
Like the menu screen on that game was like slow-mo, like a bunch of sperms, like it was meant to be the ejaculation. But it was an educational game to run alongside this TV show. But they had a Wellcome Trust collaboration for that TV show. And this guy, Dr. Alan Pacey, he was like the sperm guy. And I was like, oh, wow, we get to make a game about sperm, about trying to fertilize an egg for educational purposes. It has to be as real as possible. And we've got this scientist telling us what works, what doesn't work. And it just kind of started the process of thinking about games really differently. And I remember getting emailed years and years after that game was sort of like discontinued, biology teachers using it to help soften the conversation about sex ed with their students, because the students are asking them questions about how the hell is this happening? Why is there all these sperms like dying around me? So that was a really fun experience. It kind of like peeled back that journey.
And if we want to play that game, is that something we can still do?
I'm pretty sure you can get, there's like a plugin for Chrome called Ruffle, I think, so you can play old Flash games. Yeah, you can search The Great Sperm Race and you can hit the first level, the vagina. It's awesome, actually, like going back and playing it. I think I did so recently, and we've got bouncers at the start of the fallopian tubes with VIP ropes. It's nuts. It's actually crazy. Science.
I am genuinely fascinated, and I am genuinely going to go and try and play it.
You will learn a lot.
Maybe I will. But tell me a bit more about what GLITCHE'R'S is developing now and the work you're doing around Alzheimer's.
Yeah, so obviously there's a transition there from like working on games about sperm and education and stuff like that. But I think the idea of games doing something beyond just entertaining, but still being entertaining, is quite fascinating, I think. Because people, when they're playing games, they're really engrossed in what they're doing. So they're sort of, by default, they're engaged and they're enjoying it. And I think sometimes people will take that to the nth degree where they think they can trick people into learning by providing them very straightforward educational content. And I don't think that works. But we were fortunate to work with some really incredible neuroscientists through Saatchi and Saatchi, and a project funded by Deutsche Telekom to collect a benchmark data set for spatial navigation. This is one of the earliest indicators of Alzheimer's, and it didn't exist. I think when we think about science, we assume they have all these like really cool data sets that they can test against, and they really don't. They have to be created somehow. So building a game that collected the spatial navigation data set was really that kind of first journey into building a game for dementia intervention. I didn't realize how big it would be, and I didn't realize the impact of it at the time. But yeah, we still work with that now, and it's kind of the core of our sort of flagship product now in 2025.
Nice. And you said before the idea for where you are now with GLITCHE'R'S came out of a bit of a personal story. Can you tell us a bit more about that background?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned that I worked with my brother Josh when we ran Johnny Two Shoes, and we were doing some crazy stuff. Like we had a mobile game that was about pirates reclaiming land off the British Empire, which was really fun, called Plunderland. And after this game came out, it was actually sort of gangbuster successful. Like Apple featured it everywhere around the world, and we had like pre-installed on iPads in their stores. So in Japan, you'd pick up the iPad and it's like you're playing our weird pirate game. But this was like, I think the success kind of got to our heads a bit, and we started working on this massive universe exploration game. And my brother at the time, he was sort of working all hours, going absolutely wild on it, building these sort of like interplanetary spaceships that would hop with no loading times. And in the middle of that, he had a kind of series of psychotic episodes. It was a really stressful time because me and him were sort of 50-50 company owners. We're brothers. We're having these like very intense work schedules. And when a mental health event like that pops up, you kind of reassess everything. First of all, you think like everything's gone. You know, like everything you know about the world around you sort of like gone up in flames. But he eventually got diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And I thought, how long does this last for? And it's a lifelong thing. And it's when you realize actually that you so weren't prepared for this thing and you had no education about it until it happened. Yet you're making these games that are getting played by millions of people. Like, it felt very disconnected. Like I felt like there was a piece of work that could be done there. And so that's really what GLITCHE'R'S was founded on, the principle of sort of like trying to communicate some of these really complex things to people in a way that would resonate with them, in a way that felt natural to them and not feel like a piece of education, to try and really stop people being put in the position that me and my brother were, where he's in crisis and I'm rapidly trying to learn what that means and what that mental health thing looks like. So yeah, it was a very course correcting or course changing event that sort of started that.
Yeah, that must have been really, really difficult.
It was nuts, but I think it's good to talk about it. And everyone's got their own version of that story. This isn't unique. It's just what you do with that information, right? You either let it crush you, or you try and take the bits of that you could use to come out the other side and be better or do something better with the time you have, kind of thing.
So do you think there might be other health interventions on the horizon for GLITCHE'R'S as well as the dementia and Alzheimer's side of things?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the dementia focus has been kind of, in a way, like my inability to explain the big vision of what GLITCHE'R'S is all about. And that's actually, TechScaler super helped me with that, to try and zoom out a bit and talk about what it is we're trying to do long term. You know, the idea of like the North Star and all that stuff, these kind of buzzwords, which you, on the face of it, when you're coming at this from like an independent person without funding, you kind of hate.
Yeah.
But you realize how valuable they can be. And I think for us, I know how to communicate it now very easily. Like, we want to be the Fitbit for your brain. And that doesn't mean you're limited to Alzheimer's. I think when you look like holistically about how the brain works, it actually has so many kind of shared parts that when someone's diagnosed or being treated for a disease type, it's actually not so as siloed as we think, that it kind of shares commonalities or comorbidities with other things. So Fitbit for the brain really is to try and help people be in charge of their own brain health Just like Fitbit enabled us to see how many steps we're getting per day. I want to show you what it means to change your diet and see what effect that has on your cognitive performance, and actually warn you when something's going wrong. So if you're approaching crisis point, we tell you when you can do something about it rather than when you're in it. So that's the kind of the big vision. And I think sometimes you have to be disease specific at times because people can relate to that. And as much as I hate to say it, like schizophrenia is not a disease or a mental health issue that people really like to talk about. They're scared of it. But when someone's grandparents or parents have suffered from Alzheimer's, it's much easier to communicate with them because they're feeling that emotional connection to that particular disease type. But really, I'm talking about all neurodegenerative diseases, all mental health issues, which for some people is too big. It's like, whoa, just calm down. You're going for the freaking moon. I'm like, and the rest.
And to help you do that, so you're coming from originally a pure gaming background. So what have you had to do with like the structure of your team and the partnerships you're working in to like bring that expertise in? Because this is like very different to where you started.
Yeah, it's super complicated. Look, not everyone's cut out for it because it is very different. I think growing the team has been like a really big struggle. But people really do care. I think people will put their intention or their motivation behind why they're doing something ahead of everything else. I really love seeing that in people. Like we're really fortunate to have such a great team who are really all sort of believe in the mission, but the mission kind of tweaks and changes as we go because it has to. Because TechScaler is saying like, hey, talk to this mentor, and that kind of changes my perspective slightly too. But I think that the biggest takeaway for me about collaborating with non-games companies or non-game institutions is like every industry has their kind of ego, and you can't let that pollute what you're doing. But you need to understand, like, as a developer or designer of games, that you still need to make it a game. Like for us, it's very much game first, but it's all the time maintaining this very elusive at times objective that they have.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're working with certain people who have no idea about software development, let alone games, that can be such a struggle. Like you're educating each other about each other's roles at the same time as building something. It's kind of nuts, but it's fun.
And can you talk a bit more about the kind of partners you do have at the minute? Like what kind of people are you working with outside of your immediate organization?
So we run Sea Hero Quest as a research platform. So we have about 200 research projects running on that across different disease types, Alzheimer's primarily, but there's lots of things like ADHD, autism, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, loads of really cool things that are happening where people are starting to look at games as a way to engage their population of patients. I mean, I don't like using that word. I call them players always. So we work a lot with CNRS. They're our data science team. Like we have some incredible breakthroughs with them recently on the kind of AI side, which is really cool. UCL, massive collaborators right from the beginning. Spears Lab, who have like this kind of lab at UCL. He's now like the Vice Dean of Innovation at UCL, so he's kind of big dog. But we speak with these institutions and teams all the time. I'm just fascinated with what people find they can do with Sea Hero Quest and things like that. We also work, so I think like GLITCHE'S objective is really about health span. It's about trying to make the most of our time on the planet and make the most of our time healthily. So having like a positive brain health, having positive physical health, so we can enjoy our time here really simply. So that extends to the environment as well. So we have projects with University of Stirling at the moment where, I mean, this is actually such a wild project. We built a game where you could restore a natural landscape as a prototype. And now we are using real ecological maths to drive what is primarily a simulation of an environment, but you get gameplay objectives on top of that. Because there are no right or wrong answers with the environment. Everyone has a subjective perspective. It's like, I love ducks, therefore ducks over humans forever, you know? And but farmers might be like, yo, stop doing this and that because my crops are getting messed up. And so you have to try and balance all these things. There's too many of us on the planet to really satisfy everyone 100%. So we have to make these kind of deals. So this game sort of looks at what does that deal process look like? How do you put people in the shoes of another perspective when the environment's at play? It's quite fun.
That sounds amazing.
It's really cool.
Have they released the Scottish beavers in any of these yet?
They haven't, but we could. The tool itself, you can make. It's going to be the first open source project we ever do. So you'll be able to take your Scottish beavers and create a scenario with real ecological maths and see how those beavers survive in a landscape with whatever you like, with a bunch of food and all this other stuff. Is kind of crazy.
I'm really looking forward to see where that bit of things goes.
No brain health stuff, just the beavers.
Yeah, back to the brain health stuff. You mentioned a few times already the different bits of support you've got from TechScaler and CodeBase.
Yeah.
I know you've done some work with Andrew, one of our entrepreneurs in residence. You were in Japan with me for a few weeks doing games-related stuff. It would be great if you could just talk a bit more about the different touch points you've had with TechScaler and how they've influenced the direction you've gone in with Glitchers. Definitely.
I mean, there's no one. It doesn't seem like there's a one-size-fits-all type thing with TechScaler, which is cool. I initially thought it was only for startups, and we're not a startup, so yeah, I think that kind of made me sort of reticent to kind of get in contact initially. It was only at Scottish Edge. I think people wanted to talk to us because they saw our pitch on stage, and it's like, oh, there's this whole ecosystem of stuff here that we are not taking advantage of that could be really cool. Initially, I was like, oh, the mentors thing makes so much sense. I've always loved the idea of talking to someone who's been through that journey. But I'm also so loyal that I'd probably stick with one forever. And I think the idea is you're meant to swap them around. So I've tried that out and actually found it really good. And then, yeah, the entrepreneur in residence, Andrew was entrepreneur in residence. Andrew's been super cool. And he got so excited about what we're doing. That just opened up loads of doors as well. And then, yeah, the Japan trip, fascinating because, like it or not, we're sort of stuck in our own little bubble of stuff. And as much as I love Edinburgh and Scotland and where we are, that there's so much going on around the world. We need to see what it looks like. What's the shape of it? How could this thing be global? What does that look like? And I think Japan's a very tricky market. But for us, I love the idea of the trip because Japan and games are synonymous, as well as their aging population. I think when you think of Japan, you think of loads of cool stuff, but really they do have an aging population and they love games. Yeah. And that is very true. And they're freaked out. And as you can imagine, that comes with high rates of Alzheimer's. And so I thought it was really fascinating to try and understand, look, we need to think about that as a primary market for our product because they could really use it. But it's a global problem, so eventually we're going to have to do that everywhere. But yeah, I thought that was a great eye-opening experience to have the opportunity to do that and to see what that ecosystem looks like over there, because you always sort of compare and contrast. That was a really, really nice time.
And I think one of the things that I really like about the way the international trips are structured is that we don't just take people for 4 or 5 jet lag days, from meeting to meeting and meeting. You have a bit of flexibility in there to do your own stuff, and also your flexibility to get to know the rest of your own cohort a bit better as well. Because you are not originally from Edinburgh. You moved here not that recently, but quite recently.
I didn't have the accent.
So how did you find spending time with other games companies that you'd not worked with in the past?
Yeah, I loved that. We had a group of people that were all doing games or games adjacent stuff together. And, I knew probably half of them from events and things like that. But to get time on the ground and spend some serious time with them and actually get to know each other more was a great experience. And also, yeah, you're not there for 15 minutes, you're there for 3 weeks. I think that's one thing that I saw in the questions were about these trips is it is a real dedication. I think you go there and it's like quite intense setting. You have to have a solid reason why you're there, but also you can't just up and leave. That you got to stick that out. And you know, it's not very difficult with Japan because it's so awesome. And there's like some really cool events and things like that. I just really enjoyed it, and I think it feels like one of those opportunities that I'll look back on for a long time and be like, that was a really pivotal moment, you know?
Oh, that's really nice to hear. So when we were in Japan, I know you were applying for Scottish Edge. And can you tell us a bit more about that process and how it was doing that from a completely different time zone? And more importantly, what was the outcome?
Yeah, that was cool because like the Japan trip wasn't just sort of like back to back everything every single minute of the day. We still got a chance to, take part in things that were happening elsewhere, also make our own schedule and things like that. But we had applied for Scottish Edge. It's like a competition in Scotland where they kind of pick some exciting companies and you go through these kind of phases. So it was like the semi-finals. And I remember emailing Kevin from Scottish Edge and being like, yo, can we change the date because I'm going to be in Japan? And it's like, no. And I was like, oh God, I have to do this pitch at like 8 p.m. But it was really cool actually because I had Sonic as a little mascot in the background and from the Sega Sammy building. And we won the semi-finals part. So that was, we went through to the semi-finals from that kind of trip. I think Japan helped. You know, we had this kind of like ethereal allure being completely on another part of the planet. But, you know, we actually went on to win Scottish Edge as well, which is really great. So I'm really buzzing that we were still able to kind of like take part in that stuff from Japan and then, go on to secure the win.
And how much did you win from Scottish Edge?
So I think in the end we won £75,000, which is really cool. And there was a bunch of really cool companies there too that were, so different from us. I mean, that's the cool thing about that competition is that you're alongside people who have this cool guy who runs like a dog grooming company or this other company that's like growing vanilla beans in Scotland. Like, what? It's just like nuts. And we're just this kind of, oh yeah, we can see Alzheimer's early. So wild what's happening in Scotland, right?
Yeah. And is there like other investment on the horizon for you?
I mean, I hope so. We're doing our best. We just got into another competition in the US. So we're going over to San Francisco for TechCrunch Disrupt at the end of October. So we're in the startup battlefield. I think it's quite a prestigious competition to get into. So I'm really excited. I never thought we would get in. But I need to sort of like up my pitching game because it's going to be on stage and it's like where Dropbox and Fitbit all started kind of out. So the competition will be probably quite fierce.
And how have you found balancing applying for things like TechCrunch and for Scottish Edge alongside driving the business forward? Like, how do you find balancing your time?
Good question. Well, it's not just me, right? Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of us. There's 5 of us at GLITCHE'S. So we sort of all working on different bits, primarily product focused, but Becky does a lot of the successful applications. She's really good at getting that stuff through. And you end up coming up with a format. I think what's really nice as well is you throughout that process, the success, the rejections, all the stuff in between, you do work out what it is you're actually doing and how to explain that in a very short space of time. Because no one wants to listen to you lecture them about a crisis point, unless they're super interested, and that's great, and I want those conversations. But most of the time it's like, yeah, we're doing this stuff for the brain, and it's like cool that you're going to be able to see inside it.
And the reach you've got for the product is already really, really impressive. Like when we were doing the prep for this, I saw some really impressive numbers floating around. Can you talk a little bit more about how Sea Hero Quest being used at the minute, or like other products that you're building, what kind of traction you've got with those?
Yeah, I think early doors. I mean, I'll go back to the start because I think I want to sort of demonstrate the sort of like the negativity of numbers as well, because I think some of our first Flash games, they were getting played 150 million times. It does nothing for your expectations going forward into a world where the next game might get 20 million, and you're like, oh god, it's a failure. But these are also the different periods in time, right? But Sea Hero Quest, when it first launched in 2016, we were aiming to get 100,000 players in the first year of launch. And for me, I felt very confident about that. It felt like a very small number. But for science, that's massive. Yeah. You don't really often have studies of people more than 1,000 people. 500, 700 have seemed quite top-level scientific studies. So to have 100,000 would be bonkers. And we did that number in the first 10 hours after launch. So everyone was losing their stuff. Everyone's losing their minds. I should have said that. Everyone's losing their minds. And then we ended up collecting 4.3 million players' data. Something like 31.5 million levels. Nearly 600,000 hours of play. So to actually collect that in a scientific lab like the environment would take hundreds of years. Thousands of years. So having that data really was so helpful for loads of new kind of findings to take place. That's why there's 29 papers published on that data set now. But yeah, you've got to try and recontextualize your brain all the time when you're dealing with different industries too. Because sometimes it's amazing when 1,000 people do something or 100 people do something. If you're walking around carrying these incredibly large numbers in your head, you're setting yourself up for disappointment over and over again, because you might have had, lightning strike that one time, and then you kind of get used to that big bolt, and it's not realistic to get that every time.
I like that it sounds like you're still a little bit disappointed with your numbers on your absolutely phenomenal research database.
I'm not disappointed. I do think we can do better.
Okay.
So we're relaunching Q1 26. Sea Hero Quest will be back out in the public. You'll be able to download that, and there'll be loads of new things that we announce at TechCrunch Disrupt about what you'll be able to do. We'll be demoing that product on stage there. Yeah, I think 4.3 million people. Compare that to Fitbit. I reckon we can, probably be more like 10 million players a month kind of thing. Completely outperform our original data set. Yeah, and give access to that data to researchers and see what crazy things we can find out about the brain. Peel back the black box.
Nice. So that's relaunching Q1 2026?
That's the plan at the moment, yeah.
What else is happening in 2026?
I would say we're really focused on Sea Hero Quest and building out the platform around that. We've got two products. We've got Sea Hero Quest, which is the kind of front-facing one. And then we've got Celeste, which is our kind of back-end database. Data workbench, not database, where you can kind of poll all of the data in real time. And it's actually nuts. I never thought we'd be building such a kind of hardcore systems product. But yeah, you can apply that to other research projects as well, which is cool.
What advice do you have for people who might be considering becoming a founder themselves?
I would say don't learn too much about what it is you're going to do. In a way, be naive, because I think the more you learn, the less you're going to do it. It's a really crazy experience, and every day feels do or die. And that's very stressful. And I think it can sort of wear away your ability to sort of live in the real world sometimes. But it's also incredibly exciting. But the roller coaster goes up and down. So can you cope with the downs? Setting aside proper mental health time is really important. And I don't think anyone can really do enough of that. But no, I'd say it's super fun though. Yeah, I feel like you get to see things from slightly outside, depending how far you want to go. I'd like to be further out, And
you mentioned earlier that your perceptions on TechScaler maybe changed a bit from once you actually joined the program. What would you say to other people considering joining TechScaler?
I would say if you are seriously working on a company and you're sort of overwhelmed with all these different options, there is a team of people here that can really help you kind of focus down on what it is that you should, potentially focus on. Because everything feels like it's on fire at times. Sometimes those fires are bigger than others, but you don't realise because you're too close to all of them. I think the mentorship is really, really helpful. But that's like the starting point, I think, because you're kind of finding your feet about how this whole ecosystem of things could work for you. But you get these cheerleaders in TechScaler. We've got people who reach out to us all the time, and have become like buddies, who are sort of pushing us to do new and different things and asking like how things could change around here, kind of thing, because it's adapting all the time, and it's not just for startups; it's for scale ups, and I think probably anyone who runs a business, it seems. There's something here for them as well.
That's really good to hear, and it's nice to hear we have so many internal cheerleaders on Team Glitchers at the minute as well.
Yes, we've got a little. I feel like we've got some friends and fans, which is cool.
You definitely do. And for people that are considering applying for one of our international trips, obviously you came to Japan, but we send people to Silicon Valley, to Singapore, to other places. What would you say to people considering that opportunity?
I'd say do it, because, I mean, ultimately, why wouldn't you? If you can dedicate the time and properly be present on those trips, it's really worth it. And I think the things you go out then, it might not necessarily be the things you come back with, but that's all about that kind of journey in a way. It's about being adaptable and seeing what's available and just kind of rolling with it a bit. Can't be rigid on these things. But yeah, you'll have a chance. I mean, we had a chance to sort of like pitch in lots of different form factors. In non-native English-speaking audiences. And I tell you what, things hit so different. So it's definitely worth getting yourself out there and seeing. If you've definitely got this global attitude towards what you're doing, I think you have to get on these international trips.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you got the opportunity to experience Japan and Japanese business culture, so that if you find yourself back there in a few years, you know what you've got to expect when you get there.
Yeah, hopefully less than a few years.
We'll see. Thank you so much for coming in today, Max. And it's been really great to hear what's changed with GLITCHER'S since we were in Japan sort of 4 or 5 months ago. And it's really exciting to hear that you're going to be on stage for TechCrunch Disrupts as well. When will we hear when will that be happening?
It's happening at the end of October. So yeah, I think they'd live stream it. Not, if you want to see me sort of wince on stage, then tune in.
The CodeBase fan club will be lined up with popcorn to see how you do.
No pressure.
Thank you so much for today, and keep us up to speed with what happens next with GLITCHER'S, and let us know when we can download the new version of the game as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you so much.